Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and we're continuing our conversation about immigration in this episode. Earlier this week, we brought you part one of our special town hall recorded in late January in Minnesota, just after Minnesota became the focus of an aggressive federal immigration crackdown that sparked protests, national debate, and left 2 American citizens, Renee and Alex Pretti, dead at the hands of federal agents. Those events quickly became a flashpoint in the broader conversation about immigration enforcement, civil liberties, and federal power. In a little bit, we're going to check in with Minnesota Public Radio's Richert to find out what has changed in Minnesota since January. But first, let's go back to the town hall. Catherine joined me there, and a live audience of Minnesotans was there as well. And I asked Catherine a question many people across the country were wondering around that time. Why Minnesota? Why did that state become such a central focus of the government's crackdown on immigration?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, I think this probably goes back to some degree to the 2024 presidential election, where Governor Tim Walz was chosen to be Kamala Harris's running mate. A lot of vitriolic language traded on national TV and debates during that campaign. And then more recently, we have found our courts are litigating cases of fraud, most notably in a COVID era program that was meant to help feed kids who couldn't, access food at school. And that fraud is real. It's being litigated in the courts, and it is most of the people who have been charged so far are members of our Somali community, all of whom I should point out, the vast majority of the members of our Somali community in Minnesota are naturalized citizens. So what we saw late last year was an intense focus all of a sudden from the Trump administration on these allegations of fraud in Minnesota. Obviously, we had seen ICE enforcement in other blue cities like Chicago, right. Portland. And then, we had Governor Tim Walz drop out of the race, and things just really seemed to amp up right around that time at the start of the new year. So for people outside of Minnesota, it might seem like this suddenly happened. I think for us who are watching the news here and paying close attention, it felt like a trickle, and then all of a sudden a bit of an explosion.
Right. I'm glad you brought up the point about the Somali American community because, almost all of them here in Minnesota are either citizens or have a green card. They are not people that would be able to be deported by President Trump or by the administration.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, too, late last year, the Trump administration said they were specifically going to increase ICE enforcement and target Somali Americans in Minnesota. So that's kind of how this was being talked about just in late 2025.
All right, let's get to some more members of the audience. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Victor Bisakin, and I'm from West St. Paul, Minnesota. Thank you for doing this. I'm going to touch on, some of them touched most of the things I wanted to talk about. One, about the traumatizing our children. I'm married to a Mexican. We have mixed kids. My son goes to a Spanish dual immersion school, and it brought sadness to our eyes, when he says, asks, where are my friends? What's happening? And then he even brought the name. We're talking about Bovino now in class. We're talking about ICE. And Dad, what's ICE? Mom, what's ICE? So the sadness about that is just, it's really sad. And then talking about traumatizing our people, the trauma this is causing, and then the recovery from that. We're not even talking about when this is over, what's going to happen, how people can get past this. But I also want to touch on what my brother Elvis says, the humanity. The lack of humanity is what kills me. I posted oh my God, forgot his name, the young, beautiful kid, blue jacket, and I posted, is this the worst of the worst? And guess what happens? People are laughing, and they're laughing about that situation. So, and I'm like, what is going on with humanity? And he touched on that. That's what breaks my heart. And lastly, I enjoy our politics, and you touched on that a little bit. This morning, there was a hearing about the federal law enforcement here in Minnesota, about 3 hours, and the sadness, the story. I mean, if you had a heart or soul, tears of stories of what happened to our people. And then we have, I hate to say this, Republicans questioning that. And so my question is, how long, how much? I mean, what do we have to do to get both parties to even sit down and acknowledge, let's call it what it is. This is racism. They're targeting people that look like me or brown or this is racism. Let's call it what it is. It's not about fraud. Yes, we started about fraud, but it isn't about fraud. And you just said there are other states who have more frauds than us. But here are people families ripped apart because they look brown, black, and it's really sad. But what do we need to do to get our politicians to sit down, acknowledge this is wrong? They couldn't even do that today. The Republican Party could not do that today and say this is wrong. No, it's all about we got to help federal agents do their job.
I thank you for asking that question. I'm afraid to say I don't think that either of us are going to be able to answer that question about when.
If we could, then
yeah, if we could. Wow. But I appreciate that. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hi. How are you doing? My name is Zach Abdi. I'm a resident of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I came here as an immigrant in 1998. So I've been a resident of the state the majority of my life. And, you know, for one, as a naturalized immigrant, I'm scared. I'm worried, and I have some criminal history in my past of just minor things, but I'm worried, is that going to get me on a radar to be fastly denaturalized? And what does that mean for me? And just like my brother here, I just started carrying my passport with me just in case, right? Which is weird to me, but I'm just amazed by the amount of hypocrisy there is going on in this country, where the vice president is married to an immigrant woman, the president is married to an immigrant woman. The president has committed millions of dollars worth of fraud from a children's organization, right? So I'm going to echo what he said, and I think it's racism cloaked in this protection of taking away the worst of the worst, you know?
But you're worried about denaturalization, which is not even something that really happens in the U.S., but it's been threatened. But you're actually worried that it could happen.
And it's is there something is that allowed to happen, or can they do that? I mean, in some cases they can. And I think, this administration, I would have put it beyond them to find some sort of way to push that forward.
Hi,
Yes,
my name is Mindy DeHate. I've lived here for 7 years, native New Yorker. I was raised a Republican. At 17, I turned into a Democrat. But there's a lot of questions and a lot of comments that I want to make. But as a business leader that has done business around the world, where I've seen the effect of our inhumanity and our blatant racism within our own country affect businesses, I just want to say there are a couple things that I think that's happening right now. I think it did start with Governor Walz and Trump. These are two boys that are in a little fist fight that can't think about people outside of themselves. I think that we were targeted for a couple of reasons. One was, look at the weather. It's very easy to stand or be parked outside of a car when you think people in Minnesota aren't going to stand up for themselves. And so I think that made us a really easy target.
You're saying that the federal government thought that it would be too cold here for people to actually go out and demonstrate.
Just think about it.
It is very cold. I will say that.
Just think about it. And when you look at our GDP and the amount of money that these criminals are contributing to our country, I think that would be really a great number for you to report. And I don't think that's been brought up. I haven't seen it on any newscast. So we're trying to get rid of these criminals, but what are we doing to these families? They're contributing to our country.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we've seen the economic impacts of restaurants closing for extended periods of time. It felt like a trickle at first, and now we're hearing many reports that because people are afraid to leave their houses, it's affecting all sorts of businesses, large and small. I want to go back to something you said earlier, though. You mentioned Governor Walz and President Trump trading barbs. How do you feel about Minnesota's political leadership throughout the last few weeks?
You know, I think that for me, I'm kind of right in the middle because I want to believe in leadership. But, you know, I have family all over the country, and New York and Texas, and friends globally. And no one really knows what's going on here. We know what's going on because we're living in it. I had a friend call the other day and over FaceTime and said, you know, have you come in contact with someone personally? Has this personally affected you? And I laughed. This is an educated woman. And I thought, yes, it's affecting us. This is horrific. This is really not, again, about party. This is about just being human. We see it in the streets. People are making foolish decisions. Someone tried to help a woman that was falling, and he gets shot and killed. These are, I think, you know, the people that are being highlighted are the wrong people. I think that we talked about it today. Let's highlight community. Let's talk about what we can do for each other. And it's more than political. And I think, to your point about, you know, two grown men that are disagreeing about something, this is goes beyond politics, being liberal or conservative. It goes far beyond that.
This is what everyone's talking about.
Everything's on the table.
This is what champions come to take. This is what everyone came to see.
And the slam!
No do-overs. No second chances. No more Mr. Nice Guy. This is winner take all. The NBA Finals continue on ABC and the ESPN app.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Ron Harris. I live in Minneapolis. I'm a former Chief Resilience Officer for the city of Minneapolis. And it's really important to understand this moment in context. Number one, we asked the question, why Minnesota? And I think we answered it decently, but I think there's other things to think about. Politically, the state has voted blue the last 50-something years. We are also, though, a symbol of good governance, good education. We're good for business. We're good for workers. We're diverse, right?
Good public media, by the way.
Excellent. Seriously, excellent public media and excellent independent journalism.
Yeah.
Right? They are trying to make us a model and a symbol. Or we are a symbol, and they were trying to tear that symbol down. Donald Trump understands symbols more than any leader elected I've ever seen. So you have to look at this through the lens of political theater. The point is to disorient. The point is to confuse. The point is to intimidate. The point is to scare. The point is to separate us and think that our power comes from the individual, not community. The only way that we lose this is we fall into that. What you're seeing right now, you're seeing the best of Minnesota, and we're pushed backs against the wall. You're seeing people connect with each other. That's how we push back, is we remind them that we find our strength actually in community. The reason why, and folks have said this earlier, the reason why we're responding so well to this has been infrastructure built years before this moment. We didn't stop organizing after George Floyd's murder. We kept training and kept organizing and kept building up leaders, right? The last thing I'll say is Trump is personally obsessed with this state. He says that he won Minnesota in 2024. I ran the Harris campaign in Minnesota in 2024. I know exactly what happened in that race. He hates Ilhan Omar, he hates Tim Walz, and again, he understands symbolism, and he's trying to show the rest of the country progressive policies is a no-no, diversity and immigration is a no-no, working together, all those things. He's trying to tear us down. So for the rest of the country, this is the blueprint for fighting back.
One of the things that Republicans have been saying about Minnesota is, well, if it wasn't a sanctuary state and a sanctuary city and they just worked with us, we wouldn't have this problem. How do you respond to that?
There's as on-air answer and as off-air answer on-air. You know, first of all, in Minneapolis, I'll speak to, there's only 600 officers.
Police officers.
Police officers. There are 3,000 ICE agents, and many of them concentrated in Minneapolis. So even if the cops locally stopped doing their job and just backed up ICE, there'd be so much happening in our city. Like, what about the rest of us who live here, who pay the taxes? I've had conversations with police officers and some police chiefs trying to get them to see that this is a moment to widen what we call we as Minnesotans. So instead of being law enforcement versus the people of Minnesota, including law enforcement versus ICE. And I'm telling them because you got these untrained agents coming in, getting $50,000 bonuses. Where's your bonus? These folks coming here with no accountability, but you have all this accountability. And so what I say back to them is the people of Minneapolis come before helping out federal agents terrorize our folks. It's not true that the reason why things are going this way is because cops aren't working with us. Actually, the reason why this is going this way is because the resistance is working. They would not be sending Homan and Vance and Bovino and Bondi and more resources and more money if they were winning. They would not be lying about videos if we weren't winning. But we are, which is why they're deploying these tactics.
Thank you so much for that. I wonder for our listeners who are hearing this in other parts of the country, what do you think is the lesson from Minnesota to other places that may see a surge of ICE agents? I mean, we already saw now that after, I guess, a phone call from Senator Susan Collins, who's a Republican, they're not going to go to Maine as they plan to. But what do you think is the lesson for other places?
Well, Minnesota is often lumped in the category of flyover state. We're often, sort of forgotten in the discourse about our nation. And I would like to think that if people are watching what's playing out here, they're seeing a lot of what we're talking about today, which is neighbors helping neighbors, networks of people coming together who might not otherwise know each other to do what they can to support people who are afraid to leave their homes right now. I really do think that's like the headline that's not being broadcast on national media right now. And I also think that there's a level of optimism here that strikes me every single day when I'm talking to people that you would not expect.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Latasha Jennings-Dedina. I am a resident of East St. Paul, east side of St. Paul. I'm a U.S.-born Black woman, for listeners who may not be able to see me. One of the things that I wanted to share today is my experience and my journey in getting here in this physical space today. Like I said, I live on the east side. It's a very multicultural, diverse. I love my neighborhood. I looked out my window at around 12 o'clock today, and I saw a blacked out, tinted out Chevy Malibu, out of state plates, just sitting outside my front door. The first thing that I did was take photos, and I sent it to my husband, and I let him know, I think I see an ICE vehicle outside of my house, just so you know. The second thing that I did was text it the same thing to a trusted friend, and I said, this is what's happening. I want you to know. Not for any other reason than if for some reason I get picked up. For some reason, I want someone to know that that's what happened. I wasn't comfortable leaving my house today because I didn't know if just walking outside of my house would be a justification for some reason that they might approach me. I saw my neighbor across the alley as I was looking out one of my other windows, and I immediately ran out and I said, hey, I've seen this vehicle. They've moved a couple of times. They've just been sitting here for about 45 minutes now. I'm trying to leave my house. Will you watch? Will you just stand by and be another eye and watch to make sure that I could get here today? It felt like suppression. It felt like what they're doing is meant to keep us scared and afraid so that we don't get out and we don't tell people what's actually happening in our neighborhoods. And in relation or in answer to the question of does it feel like things are ramping down here? Absolutely not. It feels like those are words that are said as platitudes, and the reality on the ground is that they're just as present, more present in my neighborhood and on my block today than I've ever seen. And I've witnessed people get detained back in October, actually, right outside my house. And it looked like these were just two gentlemen on their way to work. And unmarked vehicles surrounded them, dragged them out of their truck, and detained them and left their SUV on the curb.
Let me ask you, do you make a difference in your own mind in terms of the fear that you are articulating here between an unmarked vehicle of authorities, maybe with masks on, and a police car with uniformed officers inside?
It is different. It's oddly strange too, in that I'm critical even of our local police and how they treat Black and brown communities in the Twin Cities, and yet I feel safer if I see a person in a uniform and I know that it's a St. Paul police officer or a Minneapolis police officer. And there have been instances where I've had direct contact with officers that have not been safe, that they've shown direct behaviors of intimidation that's been directed at me. And even in that context, I trust still, and that trust is low, but I still trust my local law enforcement more than I trust and the fear or the fear what could happen to me at the hands of a federal ICE or Border Patrol agent.
Part of our special town hall conversation recorded in partnership with Minnesota Public Radio just days after the fatal shooting of two American citizens, Renee Good and Alex Pretti, by immigration agents back in January. And joining me now is Catherine Richert of Minnesota Public Radio. Catherine, thanks for coming back.
Hey, Jeremy, it's good to see you.
Well, and first of all, is ICE still visible anywhere in the Twin Cities?
Yes, absolutely still here, but I would say that their visibility is far less dramatic than it was just a few months ago. Certainly we're not seeing the type of action in the streets that we had been previously, but we still almost every day get reports that ICE agents have been spotted in and around the Twin Cities and elsewhere in the state and are still detaining people, but it's happening very quietly.
We heard the emotion in people's voices there. When you talk to people in the Twin Cities now, months after these events, how are they feeling?
Traumatized and still scared, and still living with the ramifications for those who were fearful of being deported, who may have actually been deported during that time, fearful of still leaving their houses, still catching up on rent. One interesting facet in all of this that we've seen is that fewer people in Minnesota who would be eligible for citizenship are applying right now because they are just so scared of the process and the visibility that might come with it. And so I almost think that in some ways for the people who were affected by the immigration crackdown, they've gone a little bit further underground. And for people who just were friends and neighbors living in the city at this time, there's still a lot of anger and frustration around the fact that there's been very little legal action against the officers that shot Alex Pretti and Renee Good, by local and federal authorities.
And why is that? Why has there been so little legal action against those people?
Yeah, so this really goes back to the fact that the FBI would not share evidence and information with local law enforcement at the time that those shootings happened. Now, I will say that our Attorney General and Hennepin County attorney have filed charges against a third ICE officer who was involved in a non-fatal shooting during that time. I think it got less national attention because the victim did survive, but that's pretty recent. And they still can't say if they are going to be able to file charges against the two officers who shot Alex Pretti and Renee Good.
We heard from the CBS News immigration correspondent Camila Montoya Galvez that this truly was a turning point in the Trump administration's immigration strategy, that the outrage over what happened in Minneapolis really made them change tactics. Is that your sense? Has this had a lasting effect on immigration enforcement across the country?
Absolutely, because like I said earlier, it's still happening. It's just happening very quietly. And I do think that is, probably the most visible and tangible aspect of those changes that we've been seeing in Minnesota.
How much is it taking up the time of what you're talking to your listeners about these days, or are other things on the front burner now?
There are other things on the front burner. We're still doing a lot of reporting on the fallout. How many people were actually detained during that time? Including protesters, people who were just out in the streets. These are still questions we're trying to answer as reporters. There have been some things that have happened policy-wise that are a direct outgrowth of the immigration crackdown. For instance, the legislature passed $40 million in rental assistance for people who were too afraid to leave their homes, therefore couldn't work, so weren't paying rent. So there are little things happening here and there, but I think that while there are certainly other bigger news stories that are happening here, the other thing we're seeing is that this is really filtering into the political discourse in Minnesota as we approach the midterm elections. We have some pretty high-profile races happening, and which side you fall on is on the immigration issue is definitely a big messaging point that we're seeing.
That is Minnesota Public Radio's Catherine Richert. Catherine, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And thanks for listening to this special edition of The Middle, produced by Harrison Patino in association with Minnesota Public Radio. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can leave us a message at 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353, or reach out at listentothemiddle.com. I'm Jeremy Hobson. I'll talk to you soon.